Hey, Akim Shalom, Shalom. First and foremost, Shabbat Shalom. First and foremost, I give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakah Kwadash, level honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth. Citations to the sincere Akim and Aquathami. Listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I just wanted to continue doing a little bit more, I guess you can call it like a little bit of spiritual extrapolation from this chapter. It was a chapter that really moved me. Um, so the title I have on the screen here, it says Nehemiah's Servitude, right? So, there's a lot of things that I noticed, in this particular chapter between, our people and, it's essentially in a very like lofty position. And, you have a lot of other people in lofty positions, and essentially the character, even though they might have a lofty position, our people, their character still isn't there. And our people, and something I've noticed, being amongst, for example, Israelites who have their own business, they care about a lot of certain things, such as so-called financial freedom and, generational wealth and all this kind of stuff. But they're essentially what a huge, major portion of our people is a lot of the fact really they're really missing a healthy relationship with the Lord and a fear of the Lord, right? And these particular things, they don't have these particular things, so they don't understand and how to essentially conduct themselves with one another. They've lost the understanding of how to conduct themselves as, for example, the men with the women, the women with the men, because they don't have a reverence for Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, right? In their spirit, they know that they're kings, but they don't conduct themselves as their kings, right? Essentially, like when you read Jeremiah, it says that, the Lord has planted us to be a noble vine, a holy and a right seed. How then are turned into the degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me. So not only we become degenerates through the sense of, okay, we've claimed to a lot of these other gods, we've began worshiping and taking on their practices, but our conduct as a people is sorely lacking. And you can see, and a lot of evidence for that is like, how a lot of these other nations even view us as a whole. Because, a lot of these, especially like, I'm just going to use so-called blacks, they're not seen in a very positive light. Like, for example, okay, if they're, because a lot of these other nations have a little bit more of a sense of tradition, order, I should say, as well. Especially amongst Ishmael and Elam, like, because, a lot of them do the arranged marriages and the, the dowry, and, um, they have these particular things in place, right? But, when they look at a lot of our people, our youngsters, essentially the degenerate monsters, essentially. So, anyways, not to go too off topic, but I just wanted to hit a couple points more in this particular chapter, like more, like a little bit more towards the end. And and as always, this hopefully this lesson is edifying. um I want to get this first precept here. Just bear with me on this. Okay, this is Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10, and it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. For by me thy days shall be multiplied, and thy years of thy life shall be increased. Right. So it gives you us understanding of essentially, how to move, things to stay away from, things to, essentially, ward off, you know, right? Because, we have a healthy fear of the Lord, like, okay, we don't want to get into these particular things, but, with our people going into the conduct, as you would see a little bit in this lesson here, they do particular things, right? And don't actually, like, kind of have that, essentially they're kind of just doing it to their own people, and they're not actually taking into account, the damage of what they're doing. Because, you know. So, this is Nehemiah chapter 5. Um, I'm just going to read a little bit of the beginning so you can get a context and understanding of a little bit more of like the setting of what's actually going on, right? So, Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 1, and it says, reading in the NIV here, it says, "Now the men and their wives raised great outcry against their fellow Jews. Some of them were saying, um, we and our sons and daughters are numerous. In order for us to eat and stay alive, we must get grain. Others were saying, we are mortgaging our fields and vineyards and our homes to get grain during a famine. Um, Still others were saying, we have had to borrow money to pay the king's tax um, on king's tax on our fields and vineyards. Although we were of the same flesh and blood as our fellow Jews, and though our children are as good as theirs, yet they have to subject our sons and daughters to slavery, and some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but we are powerless because our fields and our vineyards belong to others, right? So this is kind of going into a lot of the mischievous activity that our people were actually imposing upon, essentially, I don't want to say I guess you can call it the less fortunate group of people, the less fortunate Israelites, right? So essentially what they were doing, they were essentially charging interest as well, and that's not something that we're supposed to do for our fellow brethren, for our fellow Israelites, right? And another reason I also read this is not only to get a context of going on, of what's going on, I should say, but it also shows the a lot of, and then when you equate this to today, right? Because that which is then is now, and there's no new thing under the sun. I also read this because you have a lot of our people, for example, in different institutions, whether it's prominent positions in a company or prominent positions in a so-called Catholic Church and different denominations, and this is the same behavior that you still have going on. I remember one time, just a quick testimony. I wanted to go get a haircut, and essentially there was this guy that was cutting my hair, and he was telling me, he went there just to check out, I think he was invited to come to this church by a friend, and the friend, so he went there, and I think he ended up meeting this girl at the time, and at the girl, she was showing him the pastor and this and that and whatnot, and as he's cut my hair, he's telling me this story. So essentially what happened was, the girl, she was being very, very flirtatious with him, but she was also with the pastor. Right? And so that also made him very, very uncomfortable, right? So he too was telling me the story, and as he's telling me the story, I was kind of like, wow, this is crazy, this is interesting. So anyways, long story short, he decided, okay, to kind of like reject some of her advances, and then not go back to the church. And he was kind of feeling like, okay, these people essentially preach a certain sentiment, but they don't actually do these things with their actions, right? So essentially there was a disconnect, right? Like the scriptures say that you know they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me, right? To roughly paraphrase, right? So continuing on, it says, verse 6, it says, when I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry. I pondered them in my mind and accused the nobles and officials, and I told them, you are charging your own people with interest. So I called together a large meeting to deal with them and said, as far as possible, we have bought back our fellow Jews who was sold to the Gentiles. So essentially they were in captivity, right? I believe this was under the Medes and the Persians. That second beast that you read about in Daniel 7. It says, now you are selling your own people only for them to be sold back to us. They kept quiet because they had nothing left to say, right? So essentially Nehemiah called them out, and we're essentially kind of in like that same spirit, through our apostles and elders on down, because we call out the horrific attitudes, not the attitudes, but the horrific behaviors of these Catholic churches, because they are in that same, essentially that same sentiment, right? Because they lead our people astray, number one, and number two, they'd always, for example, they tell you, okay, the law is done away with, and all these different sorts of things that they say. The Most High and Yahushai were, so-called white people and all this kind of stuff. So essentially, they feed them food that is essentially kind of poisonous for them. They don't actually take care of the flock. But for the tithes, they realize, that completion plate sometimes goes goes around 2 or 3 rounds. You know, so they know how to, take those collections in order to take those tithes, right? Take those donations. They know how to do that, but to do anything else, they don't want to do that, right? So we're kind of like in that same stead. As a matter of fact, let me get this precept here. Just bear with me on this. Okay, Jeremiah 23, verse 1, and it says, Woe unto you, woe be unto you, pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, saith the Lord Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, power of Israel, against the pastors that feed my people. Ye have scattered the flock and driven them away, and have not visited them. Behold, I will visit upon you the evil of your the evil of your doing, saith the Lord Yahweh, right? So the Lord's going to visit a lot of these pastors for a lot of the things that they've done, right? And, a good example of that, a lot of these pastors told our people, essentially to take, that, that juice, that serpent's juice. And then you see the repercussions of what's going on after the fact, how many months, almost a year, 2 years now later on, right? There's still a lot of repercussions after taking that serpent's juice, right? So a lot of these pastors essentially have blood on their hands. And when you go into the word pasture, it actually goes back to pasture, Pasture, right? And that is a place, like, in the islands we call it, like we call a field a pasture, and it's normally like a large plain area of space where sheep, goats, cows, cattle, essentially cattle, they come there and they graze, they get food for them, and the Lord said he would feed us with pastures according to his heart, that would feed him with knowledge and understanding, right? So okay, for the sake of time, I just wanted to jump down the whole the chapter is very, very good, right? Okay, I'll start at verse 15 and I'll read down to 19, then I'll get a couple of precepts in regards to the servitude, right? So, because, that was kind of the main point I really wanted to hit in the lesson, but I want to establish some context as well, right, between the way he served versus the behaviors and the conduct of our people, right? This is Nehemiah 5 and verse 15, and it says, But the earlier governors, because he was a governor of Judah, it says, But the earlier governors, those preceding me, placed heavy burdens upon the people and took 40 shekels of silver from them in addition to food and wine. So essentially they're pushing and taking a lot essentially from the people. And this is I read this as well also to outline, this is a similar sentiment of what's going on, when our people are in these churches, today, because they are also giving a lot of, their hard-earned money, to these places, to these pastors, and these pastors are rich and they have their private jets, they have their nice yachts, they have all these different things that their hearts can desire, but they realize that, you people are still, you Israelites, you're still poor. You're still poor, like in spirit, right? Mostly in the spirit, though. That's the point I'm really trying to hit, right? That's what the scriptures say, that why do you spend money for which is not bread, and your labor that satisfy not, right? Because they spend a lot of their time and a lot of their devotion towards these pastors and thinking and believing this prosperity doctrine. They don't give you understanding about who you are, or understanding of who your enemies are, or any understanding of how your enemy fights, so you can actually be able to dodge those cheat codes and those combos, right? Because you Israelites need to understand as well, like, you have enemies, right? Not everybody out here is your friend. To put it plainly, right? And going into your customs, your culture, your history, a lot of these things your pastors don't teach you these things, right? So further on it says, their assistants also lorded it over the people, but out of reverence for the Most High Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, I did not act like that. Nehemiah had that, a sense of compassion, caring about the flock, right? And I want to get a little bit more into this, but just bear with me on this. It says 16, I devoted myself to the work of this wall, and all my men were assembled there for the work. We did not acquire any land. Furthermore, 150 Jews and officials ate at my table, as well as those who came to us from surrounding nations. Each day, and here's really the point, each day 1 ox, 6 sheep, some poultry was prepared for me, and every 10 days an abundant supply of wine of all kinds. In spite of this, I never demanded food allotted to the governor, because the demands were too heavy on these people, right? And we as a people, starting with our apostles and elders and down, we understand, like, our people are not, essentially, we don't ask, we're not asking, for all these amounts of, what's it called, like tithes and donations, and if you're able to give, we give, right? Because the scriptures say that, if you have a little, you cannot give you give according to the little that you have. But essentially, we're not in that spirit of trying to money grab and take all your funds and and stuff like that, right? Like that's not right. The scriptures say that, buy the truth and sell it not. It's very, very simple and straightforward, right? And come ye to the waters and eat, and buy without money and without price, right? And that's really the point. That's the same sentiment that we adopt, right? If you remember and recall that account in goodness. As a matter of fact, let me find it. Let me just find it. 1 second. Just bear with me on this. I think it's in Okay, here it is. This is Mark chapter 12, verse 41, and it says, And Yahushua sat over against the treasury and beheld how the people cast the money into the treasury, and how many that were rich cast in much. Verse 42, it says, There came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites and a farthing. And when you look up the value of those coins, they're actually like the lowest, essentially the lowest denomination of coins. You know, that they don't worth as much. They're not worth as much. But that's honestly all she had, though, right? So I did a lesson early on this, so you could check that on. You could check that out. So it says, verse 43. It says, And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily, Yahushua speaking, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow has cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For they cast, for all they did cast in their abundance, but she of her want to cast in all she had, even all her living, right? So she casts in everything, right? So, she has a very spiritual understanding, like, okay, she's gonna get a lot of that back, right? Um, I'll read the last verse here, and it says, "Remember me with favor, oh my power, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, for all I have done for these people," right? And that's one of the things I really, really wanted to hit too, because we want the Lord to remember us for the things that we did, right? All the things, the things that He blesses, like for brothers who have like money, or brothers who are experts in different particular avenues and can contribute to the ministry in different avenues, whether it's history or prophecy, because we always feed our people with the essentially the wisdom and understanding to actually remain stable in these times, right? Through these epistles, through these videos, and so on and so forth. Us being out on the highways and byways, week in, week out, summer, winter, fall, spring, all throughout the year, we're there, feeding you with all this understanding and wisdom. All right, so let me just get Second Ezra's. Forgive the noise in the background, if you hear any. Second Ezra 8 verse 4, and it says, "So I answered and said, Swallow then down, O my soul, understanding." Excuse me. And it says, "Understanding and devour wisdom," right? And that's the sentiment the Israelites should have, right? Because you realize if we did the same thing, that essentially, like on a surface level, like what Nehemiah was doing, you realize that you wouldn't have what you really need, for you just have what you needed for that day, right? Through that food. But I read this in regards to the fact that what we feed our people, through our apostles and elders and on down, is food, so you can remain stable during these times, right? It's not the nice sheep. You're not getting goats. You're not getting curry goat and rice and peas, and you're not gonna get that from us. But I'm reading this to parallel the servitude that he had, where he wasn't asking for and trying to place heavy burdens upon our people, but he was just giving essentially the food in his time to be able to nourish our people. And we're doing the same thing today, right? Through our apostles and elders on down. We're doing not food in the sense of wisdom, right? Because Yahushua said, man should not live by bread alone, but essentially by every word that proceeds out of the book, to roughly paraphrase, right? So I'll read a couple more precepts, but then I'll close it out. Let's get First Peter's. Okay, First Peter's 5 verse 2, and it says, "Feed the flock of the Most High Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, which is among you, taking oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but ready of mind." Right? So, when we do this, we're not doing it grudgingly. We're not doing it, for to obtain some kind of some physical kind of gain over our people, and try and get praise and admiration from the people. Like, we're not doing this, because our people you're in a destitute state, and our people need to understand why you're in this position and how you can receive mercy in these times, right? So that's why we do these particular things, like the things I mentioned earlier, right? Let's get one more. Okay, John 10, verse 11, it says, Yahweh speaking, "I am the good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. But he that is an hireling," so a hireling essentially is somebody who is, they're paid for the day. It says, "And not the shepherd, who own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep, right? So, the wolf can be likened into these other nations and these elites, essentially, because they want to put essentially a rice grain in you, and all these different devices that they're trying to do to control you Israelites. And this is something that, these pastors are not doing, but, they're so busy trying to essentially stock up a lot of the money, from the collection plate that they collect from you, right? Whether it's your enemy that's doing it, like for example, your Joel Osteens and so on and so forth, but a lot of these people can also be your own people in these particular churches and other denominations where they do this, right? So we're in the same stead as Nehemiah when you really think about it, because he was upset, just like we're upset at the wickedness of our people as well. It says, and the hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling and careth not for the sheep, right? This guy's a paid worker. They don't actually, care about the flock of of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. They don't actually, care about the hopeful elect, right? Because, in these times, we're trying to feed them with, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and how to actually come back to the Lord, right? And realizing the Lord is really what you're missing, right? But our people are so presumptuous and they think it's strictly just about money. Like, no, 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 no. Money is just a defense, right? But, and on top of that as well, it's scriptures say that, our people think that essentially godliness is great gain. And, that's what our people don't seem to understand, because, like, what coming back to the Lord really and truly teaches you is to, put on, your heritage, right? It refreshes your heritage and gives you back that conduct, conduct of kings, right? And princesses, right? This is how we used to conduct ourselves, right? So, anyways, I rambled in quite a little bit, but hopefully, you brothers found this edifying, and I'd like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Rakakudash, honors to the apostles and elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth. Till next time, I say Shalom.